Good morning. Welcome to our continuing series, Explorations in Savitri. As always, with our beloved brother, Alok. Namaste. We are continuing Book 2, the Book of the Traveler of the Worlds, Canto 10, Kingdoms and Godheads of the Little Mind. And we are at the break on page 243. In those bright realms.
Yes. So, as always, we'll see Sri Aurobindo first giving us an overview, then he will zoom into what he wants to express. So, the presence of the mind creates some kind of a self-awareness. It's something very interesting. And because of this self-awareness, there is a conscious effort because you become aware that you are an individual. And therefore, the conscious effort to connect between who you are and the world and whatever is beyond and above begins to take place. So,
where does the ego fit in here?
Yes, the ego self, it comes with that. Yes. But it is necessary to start a great ascent. As Sri Aurobindo said, it's the helper and it's the bar. So, sense of self-awareness. Also, we become aware of a subjective space which... I don't know, maybe animals have it, but at least to all our understanding of animal life, it's a very small space. They do have, in which they have maybe grief and some kind of a joy they experience inside. But in human beings, this subjective self-awareness begin to take a large room. And in that subjective space, one can tread inside and discover many things. The self and...
I have seen it in animals.
Yes.
I had a cat. 16 years, and she was dying, and she had many problems, kidneys, everything, and the doctor said we have to put her down. They took her out of the cage and put her on the table, and when I held her head, she purred so beautifully, knowing she was going, and yet with me, and Mary Helen was holding her behind and on the haunches. And she was so happy. And she was gone like that. But
Yes, so they have some kind of a beginnings. But in human beings, this really begins to develop. This conscious seeking starts with the mind. So we ended with these lines. The golden child began to think and see. In those bright realms are mind's first forward steps. Ignorant of all, but eager to know all. Its curious, slow enquiry there begins. So that's why it's very interesting that, we use the word question, questioning minds. Typically, it's a human phenomena. Animals don't question, they get perplexed, puzzled. They probably intuitively understand. But with human beings, the questioning comes. And behind the question, there is the quest. That's how I look at it. When you change the question into quest, then the real journey begins. Ever its searching grasps at shapes around, ever it hopes to find out greater things. So its first contact is through the senses, and it looks at objects and tries to understand them. It's round and flat and green and blue, etc., etc. It smells this way, so it hovers around. And then it tries to, next step is that what is behind it? Is there something greater? Yet all it does is on an infant scale, as if the cosmos were a nursery game. Mind?
2 lines.
Yeah, 2 lines. Ardent and golden-gleamed with sunrise fires. Alert, it lives upon invention's verge. So several places we see the word golden coming with the mind. And Sri Aurobindo describes that what we see in the lower creation is basically an inversion or a reflection or a limitation of what is in the higher world, the higher hemisphere. So from Sat or pure existence, we have matter. From consciousness force, we have life. From the supermind, we have the mind which has come. That's why, Dymatsena is the divine mind fallen here blind. And of course, from the Ananda, there is the psychic. That's why it's the nature of the soul to be in Ananda. And that's why I believe that, Krishna is regarded as the master of the souls. Because it's from Ananda that we have come, the soul, the psychic entity within us.
So the mind would be the golden lid.
Yes, so mind and the supermind are separated by the golden lid.
Right.
But something of that still filters. It has the urge to reach there because it's its natural home.
Yes.
So once the mind begins to question and inquire and is no more complacent and self-satisfied, it is destined to reach because it's actually looking for its home. Home of truth.
Yes.
Yeah. So it has come from there. Just as life is looking for consciousness force. Similarly, and matter is actually very obscurely, ultimately within it, it has to be divinized because it comes from the pure existent. But mind is looking for the supramental truth because it's its natural home.
In the worm foresees the coming God.
That's it.
Yeah.
So that he will describe to us. Yet all it does is on an infant scale, as if the cosmos were a nursery game. Mind, life, the playthings of a titan's babe. So the titan here is used in a different sense, the greater mind. But the mind which has come here is like a titan's babe. So it is playing. This is a very nice poem of Sri Aurobindo, a vision of science.
Oh, yes.
So he describes all that science has achieved, going to achieve over the next century, where he talks about the electricity driving the cars and so on and so forth. Man bursting into space, all that is there. Yeah. This poem is around 1914 or before that. And then toward the end he says that religion has faded and science is in the ascendant. But religion before fading tells science, cautions that look, all your labor is fine, but at the end you will have to answer this one thing. For they who cannot die, she slays them and their mangled bodies lie upon the highways of eternity. Therefore, if thou wouldst live, answer first this one thing. Who art thou in this dungeon laboring? Wow. And then Sri Aurobindo with this touch of humor says that what does the mind answer? Of course I know who I am. A gene, a plasma gas. And then it ends very beautifully that there peals a reply, a voice from the higher sphere. And it says, right now, man is an infant and he's playing with mud. One day, he will lift his head and play with the stars and the sun and the beyond. But at this point, it is playing with the mud. Even when you send in space, ultimately it is still the mud. And if you go, now, see, this is interesting. Like, when we play with mud, we look at the surface and we analyze the surface. Very interestingly, at one place, Sri Aurobindo speaks of it. When, he says our science is basically a science of appearances. It is a science of appearances. And we are only analyzing the surface contents. But we do not see the deeper truth behind. So, for example, he says that if you cannot know the secret of the lotus by analyzing the contents of the mud.
Yes.
So, where is the secret lying? He's saying it's in the heavenly archetype.
Yes.
So, now you see the myths, how myths explore reality. Myths don't explore in this way. The myths will look at a lotus as a symbol of the divine consciousness. So it is not looking at lotus merely as a physical phenomenon. When it looks at moon, it looks at the moon as the symbol of a spiritualized consciousness. That's why Shiva on his head bears the moon, which nevertheless waxes and wanes but never quite dies. So this was why I am mentioning this, is that how these two worldviews can clash and sometimes there can be total misunderstanding. When I was a child, I remember that Apollo had landed on the moon. And in villages, you have those village WhatsApp groups. Means now it's WhatsApp, which is another kind of rumor mongering. So in villages, all the people gathered together in the mohalla and they would sit together and discuss as if they are going to solve world issues. So somebody who is better read is somebody who has read a local newspaper. That's all. So there was a discussion going on. How can anybody land on the moon? It's impossible. The logic was very impeccable logic. Moon is on Shiva's head. How can it be defiled? It's impossible. Now, I remember as a child listening to the argument and finding it very funny. Well, I instinctively felt it's not about a physical moon, because obviously it will be an impossibility. Unless you look at Shiva as the cosmos, then it's symbolic. How can, but there was a discussion. Some were saying, no, Americans are capable of doing everything. So I suspect within America, the lobby which came up, which said that, Americans never really landed on the moon. That lobby. Yes. So may have been inspired by, like the Beatles were, with some Indian mystic thought, and they thought, no, it's not possible to land on the moon. But actually, the moon on Shiva's head, this physical moon, is a symbol of a greater reality. The sun is a symbol of the supermind. So when you bow to the sun, you're not bowing to just the physical sun, but like an image, like you bow to an idol. An idol is a symbol to put you in contact with the deeper reality, and sometimes this idol can be charged with this deeper truth. Yes. Because that's how the symbol is. So, these two, we just read about myths, and now we are looking at how the physical mind
sees. As a doctor, what is your feeling about Surya Namaskar?
See, I believe that anything that we do, Surya Namaskar, if you do it with a conscious awareness, it becomes wonderful. And if we look at Surya Namaskar purely from the physical point of view, well, it is a wonderful exercise, because if you look at it, it covers all the different types of postures and movements. It includes a standing series of asanas, it includes a almost flat series of asanas, sitting series of asanas. So it's a complete exercise in its own right. But I think just doing it mechanically, this my take on it, and is based on what Mother has said, that from our experience, we have found that any physical exercise done with a conscious aspiration becomes yoga. Whereas you may do the same thing without conscious aspiration. I think that's what makes the difference when human beings do it. Otherwise, the dog next door, he does a lot of these namaskars and, he does that. And who can do shavasana better than the crocodile? Nothing changes. So, I mean, it's the conscious awareness which is important. So, if one can do it, it's wonderful with the conscious awareness. As one it works, so builds a mimic fort, miraculously stable for a while, made of the sands upon a bank of time, mid occult eternities, shoreless seas. Marvelous line. See how Sri Aurobindo takes us into vastness beyond vastness. Yes. That, look at the image. What is the mind doing? It is building a mimic fort. Yeah. And where is the fort? On the sands. Where is the sand? On the bank of time. Yeah. And beyond is the eternity, shoreless sea of eternity. What a line it is.
And it's miraculously stable for a time.
Yes, for a time. So very often nowadays, we have this just to know expansion. People use this, that look at the galaxy and then they start from the atom and show the galaxies. And you see the miniature size, and then you come back to the earth. So it's one way to enter into vastness. I feel you just read 4 lines of Savitri and you are into vastness. Yeah. If you really see the image, somebody is making a mimic fort, baby, and then it doesn't know that behind it, the vast stretch of sand on the banks of time, which is, there is the shoreless sea of eternity. Then immediately your consciousness is projected into the vastness. A small, keen instrument the great Puissance chose. Here he is speaking of mind in its origin, the great Puissance. It's mind in its sovereign sense. So what it has used? The small instrument. An arduous pastime passionately pursues. To teach the ignorance is a difficult charge. her thought starts from an original nescient void. So, the Puissance choosing a small instrument to teach. So, we had these anatomy classes, since you mentioned about medicine, and so we have a dead body, and the teacher has to teach. So teacher knows about the human body, and she has her own behind all her understanding of life in general. In fact, the lady was a very fine lady, very deeply spiritual. And she would, but when she is teaching anatomy, she would use a small little scalpel, and she would pick up a nerve and say, which nerve is this? Now, your mind is focused on that. You can't even look at it like a dead body. Otherwise, you will faint. In fact, some of the people fainted. The first class you attend ever in medical school, at least that's how it used to be in India, you were thrown into a mortuary. I mean, not mortuary, but the dissection room, where there are 26 dead bodies lying all around. Ours was a young person. And my first thoughts were of sympathy. Poor fellow died, what his parents would be seeking. Next moment you pick up a scalpel. That's why doctors sometimes do become insensitive, because their mind has to be focused on that. If they think of the pain, they can't function. Yeah. So it starts with that, because it has to teach. Yeah. You can't just say it's a soul which has passed away and leave the body like this. And starts from an original void. And what she teaches, she herself must learn. It has to, with great difficulty, understand matter, the laws of matter, and then teach them. Arousing knowledge from its sleepy lair. So it's very interesting. Yeah. Knowledge is not something coming from outside. It has to be awakened, educed. That's the word education is about. Educe, it's all within. That's why, but originally it looks like coming from outside, because the way we arrive at knowledge is through the sense contact.
And he uses lair, the cave.
Which is right within. Yes. So it is sleeping. So the contact with the world through the senses actually awakens this. But we think that it is coming by observing the surfaces, analyzing, going. Yes. So that's the difference. And that's why Sri Aurobindo says a true teacher awakens knowledge. He doesn't impart, there is anyways difference between information and knowledge. And the first principle of teaching, 3 principles of teaching, one of them is, the first principle of teaching is that nothing can be taught. It's a paradox. Nothing can be taught. And then he says that the teacher has to go from near to the far. You can't suddenly give a very high profound truth. Somebody is not ready. That too we will see here. We'll see here all the principles of education which the divine uses. So divine is going from near to the far. So he is not straight away making mankind awake to the higher reality. He starts with this. For knowledge comes not to us as a guest, called into our chamber from the outer world, a friend and inmate of our secret self. It hid behind our minds and fell asleep, and slowly wakes beneath the blows of life. So we learn, we grow in wisdom, we experience, by contacts, these blows are at every level, physical level, psychological level. Yes. We begin to grow through this contact with life. Blows of life. Slowly it wakes beneath the blows of life. So while the blows are coming, it is waking up from inside, because you have to deal with life, you have to deal with issues.
And it's an inmate of our secret self. How beautiful. You
know the story of Golkund, that people didn't know. There was a debate going on where a particular, there was an engineering problem where a particular thing has to be done. So they couldn't solve it, and they were big scientists, all great people. And then they just went to mother to ask her, or rather to inform her. And mother asked them to show the map. And then she sees the print, and then she told them, do it here and this way. So Pavitrada asked her, how did you know? Then she laughed. She says, you don't have to read engineering to know. So if you have that capacity, you can apply it anywhere. It's the power that comes through sovereign concentration. What is done is that you extend the consciousness into the consciousness of whatever you are dealing with. By sheer concentration, you identify and you know the problem from within outward. And the solution lies there, and you know the solution also. That was the whole idea of, many of these pujas that people used to do. Because you want the true solution which works from within outward. And you discover that, okay, there is a mischief maker inside, there is a deity, and so on and so forth. And they would appease the deity and heal it this way. For every illness in India, there is a deity. So for chicken pox or smallpox, there used to be a deity called Shitala Mata. So, no, it's interesting. See, I'll tell you, it is very interesting way of looking at it. So I remember in the local temple I used to go, there was one particular place. Others were nice gods, Hanuman and all. I had read about all of them, but Shitala Mata is like a stone. And weird kind of stone. And she would be worshipped with proper tikka and all this. So I said, why are you? Oh, no, she is the one who takes care of the smallpox. Okay, as a child you don't know. But I now, when smallpox vanished, now many people said it's because of the vaccination. But those who believed said that's because of the deity who was pleased. Now, how do you say which one is right? Yeah. How do we know there was not an occult working and she actually decided to withdraw her, dark energies, and instruments were created, and probably scientists were appeasing her in their own way by introducing little bit of her germs in the human body. And she said, okay, I have enough, I have gone into the bodies. Now I'll resurface as AIDS. That's one of the theories of autoimmune disorders, that your vaccinations, which are like time bombs, what are they? They are live attenuated viruses. They're not dead, because if they're dead, there will be no reaction. So they have gone into the body and they are alive, but attenuated, so they can't multiply. But after all, it's a vibration of illness. That's why Sri Aurobindo says that for all its merit, vaccination is a dark and dangerous principle. Yes. And once the French government wanted everybody to have, and Sri Aurobindo writes a very humorous letter to Niruddha, that is it possible to get an excuse, at least for some of us? Look at the divine way. And here, sometime back, people were vaccinating everybody left, right and center. So I said, at least you limit it. I understand you have a tetanus injury, you want to give a vaccination. But don't start using preventive vaccination after reading what Sri Aurobindo has said. Yes. But that's the degree of, So, slowly this knowledge wakes up and it understands things from the consciousness point of view. But to start with, it just holds the surfaces. The mighty demon lies unshaped within. To evoke, to give it form is nature's task. So it's like a power. But it slowly takes form. So you have knowledge of the world, you have knowledge of this, knowledge of that. So it takes shape and form. All was a chaos of the true and false. That's how this knowledge is. Mind sought amid deep mists of nescience. It looked within itself, but saw not God. That's the anatomist. There is no God, because I have within means the body. But within, when we talk of spirituality or spiritual seeking, it is within the subjective space, extension, which is essentially through that we can enter into pure consciousness. Subjective space is in terms of physical consciousness with all its phenomena, vital consciousness with all its phenomena, with the mental consciousness with all its phenomena, and then eventually if you go deeper, you enter into the self. So that's the space. But here, within means it's a cut open the body and there is no God.
But science is now agreeing that there's a higher power.
There is a higher power, because they are compelled to, arrive. It's because you discover that medicine doesn't work like mathematics. Mm-hmm. But nevertheless, one can look at it very simply. I remember, again, one of the conversations as a child, somebody said that, they tried to create God in the test tube and it's not possible, so there is no God. I had a very atheist friend. I in my childish way, I said, how do you know that God didn't escape from the test tube and it burst open and he's too vast to be caught in a test tube? But basically, it's right that you are using a different instrument which works in a different field. You can't apply it to another field. You can't reduce psychology to a measurement of blood levels and say that, well, so-and-so is experiencing love and hate because the blood levels of this chemical are. Because it's a different field. It's a subjective field. It's not a field of measurement. All this he will reveal to us in this. But look at how Sri Aurobindo puts it. He bases knowledge on oneness. So he says, a material interim diplomacy. Who is the diplomat? The divine. So he says, if I straightaway reveal myself, they will not seek. The world plan will be thwarted. So a material interim diplomacy denied the truth that transient truths might live. Oh. And hid the deity in creed and guess. So everything has its play. You guess that there is the divine. You believe that there is the divine. Belief systems, creeds. Yes. It was necessary because otherwise man is not ready to suddenly behold that vastness. So it starts with he hides himself in the cave of matter, darkness of matter, so that man will dig. He is drawn by what is in the depths. And one day he'll discover, oh, it is energy. Then he'll go deeper. What is behind energy? He'll touch consciousness. It's a long passage. Yeah. But then he would have taken care of everything and nothing would be ignored. That is the path of the Isha Upanishad. That they who enter into light enter as if in a greater darkness. They who enter into light alone. And they who of course are in darkness, they are in darkness. So it says that you have to hold the two together.
Mother speaks at great length about religions in Oroville.
Yes.
And how there must be none.
Yes.
But she points out that it had its place also.
And it has to be overpassed. Yes. Not, some people throw the baby with the bathwater. So there is within religion a core of spirituality. You have to liberate it. There is in everything, even in materialism, there is a core of spirituality. Genuine seeking for truth. That's a core. You liberate it. You know, when she said, let there be no religion, she was asking us to do something much, much more difficult and greater. It is not this thing to a atheist that, look, no religion, so I can do anything. Also, since we mentioned about it, she also mentioned there are ideologies which are like religions, which don't believe in God. And she also said that, we should not confuse religion with just a set of external practices. Religion is something where you are held up within a belief system. But practice, like when people bow at the samadhi or offer a flower, those who don't understand what really religion and spirituality, it may declare that this is religion. But to the eye of the spirit, you see that this bowing is an expression of the gratitude you are feeling within. And this offering of the flower is not just the offering of a flower, but for some it may be the giving of something much deeper in exchange. So religion is not about the external forms, but about an inner state. When we are bound into a small belief system, restricted, narrow, dogmatic, then it's a religion. It's not about the external practices.
That professes it has more of the truth than any other.
Yes. That is, of course, a very dangerous religion. Yes. Exclusive truth, not only more than any other.
Yes.
So why does he hide? That the world ignorance might grow slowly wise. You can't teach a child in nursery that E equals to MC square. He's not ready for that. You have to teach E is the letter E as in elephant. Equal to is a sign in mathematics. M is M as in mother. C is child. That's why probably, it's an interesting equation.
Yes.
Mother-child square. That's a great equation. And 2 is 2. He doesn't even know that MC is square. But as the child grows, he will understand that this is a symbol which holds something else. So that's why these are steps of ascent. And that's why we should not disturb anybody's belief system. This great idea of no conversion stems from here. Because each one has to go according to their own readiness. This was the imbroglio made by sovereign mind. It allowed this confusion. Imbroglio. So that from appearance you go step by step. Looking from a gleam ridge into the night, in her first tamperings with inconscience, its dark, its alien dusk baffles her luminous eyes. Her rapid hands must learn a cautious zeal. Look, the combination of words. Zeal by its nature is something you want to do fast. And yet you have to be cautious. So, one can understand people who are doubting Thomases. It's a stage of evolution, they have to go through it. And the time comes when they move in circles and they don't find an issue. And then they are ready probably to probe something higher. Only a slow advance the earth can bear. Yet was her strength unlike the unseen earth's, compelled to handle makeshift instruments invented by the life force and the flesh. So this mind, which in its own realm has created the imbroglio and sees it, has allowed deliberately the slow emergence, has a power to see when we recover it. But on earth, it is compelled to use the instruments which are still animal in nature. And that's why in the yoga of self-perfection, the double labor is required. Because if you don't have a developed mind, a developed life energy, a developed heart, and even a developed body, you may have the experiences, but you can't express it. They are wonderful as far as you are concerned, but they are perfectly useless as far as the world play is concerned. So that's why this need of double labor. Earth all perceives through doubtful images. Even all the images science would tell us are doubtful. All she conceives in hazardous jets of sight. Small lights kindled by touches of groping thought. You see, every phrase, half a phrase is so perfect. Jets of sight. We look at objects as if they are continuous, but it's not true. If you actually study the retina, it's jets of sight. Photons which impinge. But we don't register it like that. It's like a moving film. Yeah, you don't actually know. Actually, it's like different little cut images. But it's run so rapidly that it looks like one moving continuous thing. So even our sight, because that's how the mind operates, it cuts things into pieces. So jets of sight, look, half a phrase. Yeah. And what profound truth is there in it. Incapable of the soul's direct in look, she sees by spasms and shoulders knowledge scrap. Scrap, waste. What the gods who are working within throw off on the surface, which looks like the surfaces of things. It studies this and that and puts it together, shoulders, welds it together, knowledge scrap. The real game is going on inside, the play of forces, the gods, the titans. And we are busy studying knowledge scrap. It reminds me of, I'm not sure whether you are aware or not, sometimes some of Sri Aurobindo's, I believe, signed books were available on a price in some, Amazon or somewhere. Can you imagine? And it was like a scrap because somebody who has used it doesn't feel the need, so it has gone into the scrap market. I got Sri Aurobindo's and the mother's signed pictures like that. In my village, when I went and one of the village, everybody is a brother and sister there. So he said, I have kept something for you. I said, I don't know what he has kept. And he took out signed pictures of mother and Sri Aurobindo. And he tells me, I know you go there, so you would value it. He didn't know what value means, what it means to me. Yeah. He said, so I have kept it for you last few months. I said, but how did you get it? He said a couple had come from Calcutta, their parents were devotees, so when the parents passed away, the children thought it's of no more use to them, so they brought the frame, they wanted to keep the frame. So they wanted their own pictures to be put in the frame. It's a very interesting story. So I asked them, can I keep the photographs? Because they are of no use to you. They said, yeah, you can do whatever you like. Now look at it. They don't know what they have left behind.
Yes.
And yet, thanks to that ignorance, I became the recipient of a wonderful grace. So knowledge scrap.
A few days ago, Sergey wrote to me, and he said there's someone selling 2 signed photographs of Mother and some pictures for just under $2,000. See, on eBay. Incredible.
Maybe they should go to somebody like those super rich people, I feel. Maybe it is meant to change their mindset. We as devotees should not buy because we'll get what we need directly. So I personally look at it like that.
Yes.
That's why they have put the rate. Maybe some super rich will buy it and it will have an effect and begin to change. For us, it is enough to have our presence within. But that's what, because for people it's just a piece of paper, just another photograph. Makes truth the slave girl of her indigence. See, indigence is poverty.
Yeah.
It's poverty. And that poor fellow is using truth as her slave girl. And this is exactly what we are reading.
Yeah.
Mother and Sri Aurobindo signed photograph to fetch a handsome amount of money. Truth as a slave girl of her indigence. Whoever has put it. Poor fellow. He doesn't know he'll become poorer.
They even have the lady's name.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's you have bartered. That's what probably the Esau and Jacob story. Selling your birthright for a pot of porridge. You must have heard, no? This is a biblical story, famous story. Selling your soul, birthright. Birthright is the soul. For a pot of porridge. So the person doesn't know what the person is bargaining for. Anyways, there are too many stories, maybe next time. Expelling nature's mystic unity cuts into quantum and masks the moving all. So that's what, Mother repeatedly speaks of it in agenda, that my body, it's like a wave. It's not like the way you are looking at my body. That's not how I am experiencing my body. She speaks of that. She takes for measuring rod her ignorance. There's a very interesting story about it. 2 stories. When somebody asked Sri Ramakrishna, tell me more about God, nature of God. He said, you know what? He had his style of saying. He said, somebody took a salt doll, tied it to a thread and wanted to measure the sea. And went into the middle of the ocean to measure the sea. So what happened to the thread is a different thing, but the salt doll had dissolved. And when he brought out, there was nothing he could understand. So this is the way, measuring rod.
Yeah.
So, and the other one we know is the famous one of Krishna. Krishna goes and tells Duryodhana that, look, I have come pleading and a supplicant. You give only 5 villages and you can stop the war. There are many people who blame, unfortunately, Krishna for the war. Actually, he tried his best till the last moment to stop the war. And he goes and tells, he becomes a, dut to convey the message, messenger. And he says, we'll stop the war, they will listen to me, just give 5 villages for the Pandavas to stay. No, I am not going to give. And then he commands his all the soldiers to tie him up, Krishna. But he says, he is the mischief maker. Tie him up. So there is a very beautiful description in Mahabharata that Sri Krishna becomes vast. And there is a very famous poet, Dinkar, and he has written a book called Rashmi Rati. He was a devotee of sort. He used to come to ashram and had the darshan of Mother. I don't know whether he had darshan of Sri Aurobindo or not. And he used to be very close to Chotnarayan Sharma. So in his book he writes, when he is denied and Duryodhana commands his army to tie him up. So Shri Krishna, and it's a very symbolic poem. Fir Hari ne yu hunkar kiya. So what does Hari, the Lord does? He just took out the sound, hunkar. It's full of strength and power. He released his power. Actually it means, फिर हरि ने यूं हुंकार किया, अपना स्वरूप विस्तार किया. He extended himself, vast and vast. And then he tells them, ha ha दुर्योधन बांध मुझे. You want to tie me? Okay, come and tie me. तो मुझे बांधने आया है, जंजीर बड़ी क्या लाया है? You want to tie me? Have you got a rope big enough? And then he shows himself and says, ये देख पवन मुझ में लय है, यह देख अनल मुझ में लय है. Look, the winds move within me. Look, the fires burn within me with all their splendor. यह देख पवन मुझ में लय है, यह देख अनल मुझ में लय है. And then he shows him the entire Kurukshetra where everybody is dead and gone. He says, वीरों से पटी हुई भू है. I am showing you what is the fate. So look, the whole battlefield is full of corpses. अब ढूंढ यहाँ किस में तू है. And search for your own dead body within my vast being. Very powerful. He says, now you want to tie me? Okay, tie me. It's a very powerful poem. Maybe a few lines here and there I may have missed, but so measuring rod by which it tries to measure. In her own domain, a pontiff and a seer, own domain before it has, entered. That greater power with her half-risen sun wrought within limits but possessed her field. At least it held. There is a whole Upanishad on this. That how at every level the one being tries to catch matter. So it's in a form of story that, if by thought he could hold, then, he could, by thinking your hunger would be appeased. So he goes at different level and finally it has to catch. It's like a little pincer, something very small. So he becomes so small to catch that. That consciousness which is sovereign, pontiff and seer becomes so small to catch the infinitesimal which its own action has created. She knew by a privilege of thinking force and claimed an infant sovereignty of sight. So it could see the infinitesimally small, what in its largeness it could miss. In her own realm she stumbles not nor falls nor fails. In her own realm she stumbles not nor fails, but moves in boundaries of subtle power. So this is where now this mind in its ultimate, the over mind and the intuitive mind in their own realm, it does not stumble or fail, but yet it is within limits. It's only in the super mind that it regains the capacity for the all-comprehensive knowledge where you see the totality and you see the detail. In supramental it is possible. Below that, there are still boundaries, subtle boundaries. Oh, interestingly, he doesn't use the word ignorance. But there is no real ignorance in our mind, but it's a step towards ignorance. But moves in boundaries of subtle power, across which mind can step towards the sun. So, he has explained to us where does the mind really begin, far high, on a sovereign plane, from the over-mind consciousness, where there is no real ignorance, but there is a boundary. Now, the moment you have a boundary, it's a first step towards ignorance. And it knows there is... The next step is the sun, but the moment it takes one step forward, it enters into ignorance, and eventually in the earthly mind, it becomes what we know it now. That he'll describe in the next passage. A candidate for a higher suzerainty. So whatever it be, mind is a candidate for regaining its higher sovereign power in its own field. It can become a seer, a sage, a pontiff, yes. Pontiff is not a very flattering word though.
Not very.
But nevertheless, it can regain a higher sight. A passage she cut through from night to light and searched for an ungrasped omniscience. So, how beautifully Sri Aurobindo is bringing the mind in its origin and its action together. And how it is meant to cut a little passage. When you have to drill a little hole in a thick wall, that mind could just smash the wall. But then there will be such a flooding of light that there will be no growth. Everything will be destroyed. So it has to drill a wall. So little light goes and there is a passage. And this little light going through this small little passage becomes the little mind, which has to go there, enter that dark field and awaken it. Because it has to go there. If the wall is smashed, when the beings who are in that utter darkness enter into this too much of light, they will be blinded. So that is the task it is given. And yet somewhere it knows that omniscience is possible because it has come from the higher realm. So with these 3 lines we'll stop. A candidate for a higher suzerainty, a passage she cut through from night to light, and searched for an ungrasped omniscience. So we'll stop here and continue coming back.